The rain had been following for hours, tapping softly against the kitchen window like a reminder that time never stops, not even when your heart does. I was sitting at the old oak table, the one my husband built before he passed. It still had the little burn marks from the candlelit dinners we used to have when life felt simple, when my son still smiled at me and called me mom with warmth instead of resentment. But that evening, the air was heavy, not just with rain, but with words that had sliced through me moments before. "You never did anything for me." He said it right there, his jaw tight, his voice sharp with anger, his eyes cold. My son. The boy I raised alone after his father died in that storm 20 years ago. The boy I gave everything to. And yet, in that moment, I saw nothing in his eyes but disappointment. He didn't know. He couldn't have known. Because everything I did for him, I didn't silence. Some things were never meant to be told. It started over something small, or at least it seemed small at first, a property dispute. The old cottage we lived in was under my name, but Oliver wanted to sell it to pay off his debts. He had been struggling ever since his business failed in London, trying to live up to some version of himself he thought the world wanted, a version that was richer, flashier, louder than the quiet boy I once tucked into bed after reading him Peter Pan. "Mom, this place is worth a fortune. You're living alone, wasting away in it." His tone was firm, practical. I tried to smile. "It's not just a house, love. It's our home. Your father built. For God's sake, stop bringing him up," he snapped. "He's been gone for 20 years. You live in the past. You never did anything for me except cling to his ghost." Those words. They landed harder than I could show. I wanted to tell him about the nights I went hungry so he could eat, about the shifts I took at the care home, cleaning floors and changing sheets until my hands cracked from the bleach, about the envelope I sent every month to his university under a friend's name so he'd never know I was the one keeping him afloat. But I said nothing, because that was the promise I made to his father, to Daniel. 23 years earlier, Daniel had been everything, gentle, patient, full of quiet laughter that filled this very kitchen. When Oliver was just 5, Daniel felt ill. It started as something simple, fatigue, chest pains, but within months, the doctors were whispering words like terminal and months left. One night, as rain lashed against the windows, just like tonight, Daniel took my hand. "Don't tell him, Margaret," he whispered. "Don't ever tell our boy what I did. Let him grow up believing I was just a teacher, not what I really was." I didn't understand then, not fully. Only later, after the funeral, did I learn the truth, that Daniel had been involved in something dangerous, something that left debts and enemies behind. To protect Oliver, I kept my silence. I sold what was left, paid what I could, and carried the rest like a ghost. Oliver never knew how close we came to losing everything, how men in dark coats came once, asking questions I pretended not to understand, how I begged them to leave us alone, and how they finally did when I handed them what was left of Daniel's savings. He never knew that I spent years looking over my shoulder, that every lullaby I sang him was to drown out my own fear. And now, 20 years later, he thought I never did anything. After he left that night, slamming the door so hard that the window rattled, I sat for a long time in silence. The house felt emptier than ever. The tick of the clock seemed louder, the shadows deeper. And then, as I reached to pour myself tea, I noticed something odd. The attic light was on. I hadn't been up there in years, not since Daniel's death. The pull-down ladder creaked as I climbed, each step echoing like a heartbeat. Dust filled the air, thick and musty. And there, under an old sheet, I found the small wooden box. The same one Daniel had given me the week before he died. "If anything ever happens, keep this safe, and never open it, not unless it's for Oliver." My hands trembled as I brushed away the dust. The box was engraved with his initials, DM, and a faint scratch, like a hidden mark, ran across its lid. For years I'd resisted opening it. I told myself it was better not to know, but now that my son hated me, I needed to understand what I'd been protecting all these years. The lock was rusted, but it gave way with a little force. Inside were letters, dozens of them, wrapped in twine, and a small leather envelope with my name. My breath caught as I unfolded the first page. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it also means you've had to keep a promise no wife should ever have to make. The letter went on to explain everything: the debts, the secret deals, the dangerous people he had crossed to pay for Oliver's schooling and treatment when he was little. Daniel had been paying for protection, for our safety, and after his death, that burden had fallen to me. In the bottom of the box, there was one more envelope, sealed with wax. Written on it, in Daniel's familiar looping handwriting, were the words, "For Oliver, when he's ready to know." I held it for a long time. Part of me wanted to march straight to his flattened Bristol and shove it into his hands, to scream, "See, you were wrong, I did everything for you." But another part of me, the quieter, older part, whispered, "Not yet. He's not ready." So I placed it back in the box, closed the lid, and promised myself I would give it to him when the time felt right. Days turned into weeks. Oliver didn't call. He didn't visit. The house grew quieter with each passing morning. I kept busy, tending the garden, walking down to the post office, pretending I was fine. But every evening, when I'd make tea for two and only drink one, the ache in my chest grew heavier. I'd leave his favorite biscuits by the window, just in case he came by. He never did. Until one morning, months later, I received a letter from him. It wasn't long, just a few lines. "Mom, I'm sorry. I just need time to think. Please don't worry, I'll be fine." I folded it carefully and placed it in my drawer next to Daniel's letters. My heart ached, but at least he was safe. I didn't know that something darker was waiting, that the past I'd buried was about to resurface. Because a few nights later, there was a knock at my door. And when I opened it, I saw a face I hadn't seen in 20 years. The knock came just after midnight. 3 soft raps, polite, deliberate, and somehow familiar. For a moment, I thought it might be Oliver. I almost smiled as I reached for the latch, but when I opened the door, my blood ran cold. The man standing there wasn't my son. He was older, heavier, his hair streaked with gray. But his eyes, those dark, sharp eyes, I recognized them immediately. "Evening, Margaret," he said softly. "Been a long time." It took me a moment to find my voice. "Mr. Hale?" He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You remember?" Of course I remembered. He was one of them, one of the men Daniel had gotten involved with before he died, the kind of man who never truly leaves your nightmares. "I'm not here for trouble," he said, stepping into the doorway, as if it were still his home. "Just thought we should talk." "I don't have anything left," I whispered. "Oh, I think you do," he replied, glancing around the dim kitchen. "You see, Daniel left something unfinished, something valuable, and I reckon you've got it." I shook my head, though my heart thudded painfully. "He's been gone for over 20 years. I don't have anything of his." He cut me off with a slow, knowing smile. "That box in your attic says otherwise." I froze. My breath caught. How did he know about the box? He took a slow step closer, the smell of rain and cigarettes clinging to his coat. "Relax, Margaret. I'm not a monster. I just want what's owed." "There's nothing left," I said, voice trembling. "Oh, there's always something left." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a faded photograph. Daniel standing beside him, both younger, smiling at some long forgotten pub table. "He promised me a favor, a delivery, before he died. That box, well, I think it might contain what I've been waiting for." I shook my head. "It's just letters." He gave me a long, slow look. "Man, you won't mind if I take a look, will you?" Something inside me hardened. "You're not touching it." That seemed to amuse him. He stepped closer, voice dropping low. "You still got spirit. But you see, Margaret, I've had people watching. Your boy's been asking around. He's in debt, isn't he? Owes a bit of money to the wrong sort. Shame if that were to get worse." The room spun slightly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he whispered, "you hand me what Daniel left, and your son never has to know who his father really was, or what he owed." My heart felt like stone. I wanted to scream, to tell him to leave, but all I could do was nod. "Good," he said with a thin smile. "Tomorrow night, then.
The box. Here. And just like that, he was gone, leaving the smell of tobacco and the faint echo of my own heartbeat behind.
I didn't sleep that night. The rain came harder, pounding against the roof like a drumbeat of fear. At dawn, I went to the attic. The box sat where I had left it, innocent and quiet, as if it didn't hold the last threads of my life. I sat cross-legged beside it, running my fingers over the carved initials. If I gave it away, I'd lose the last thing Daniel left behind. If I didn't, Hale would come for Oliver. And in that moment, my choice became clear. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Daniel's words echoed in my head, gone. But I wasn't gone, not yet. I decided to finish what he started, to end it once and for all, even if it meant Hale got what he wanted, but on my terms. So I wrote a letter to Oliver. Short, careful, written in my best handwriting. Oliver, there are things you don't know, things I've hidden to protect you. If anything happens to me, go to the attic. The box will tell you everything. Mom. X. I folded it, sealed it, and placed it in his favorite book, The Secret Garden, the one he'd left behind when he moved to London. Then I packed the box and waited.
By the time Hale returned, the wind had turned cold. The cottage was quiet, except for the faint tick of the clock on the wall. He didn't knock this time, just walked in, confident and calm. "Ah, you've got it." I nodded, clutching the wooden box. He reached out his hand. "You've made the right choice." But something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. I could feel it. He wasn't planning to just take the box and leave. As he opened the lid, his eyes flickered with greed. Finally. But before he could reach inside, I spoke. "There's something you should know, Mr. Hale." He glanced up, impatient. "I never said it was for you." For a split second, confusion crossed his face, then realization, just as the faint wail of sirens echoed down the lane. He turned to me, eyes wide. "What did you do?" "I called them," I said softly. "Told them everything. About Daniel, about you, about what you've done to my family." His face darkened. "You stupid woman." But before he could move, the front door burst open. The police stormed in. 2 officers, flashlights cutting through the dim light. Hale tried to run, but it was over quickly. They found the gun in his coat pocket, the stolen files in his car. And as they led him away, his glare met mine, a promise that this wasn't over.
The officers stayed for hours, asking questions, taking statements. By the time they left, dawn was breaking over the hills. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the box beside me, the house finally still. For the first time in 20 years, I felt free. But freedom came at a cost, because that night, the same night Hale was arrested, Oliver called. "Mom," his voice was small, hesitant. "I heard about what happened. Are you okay?" It was the first time he'd called me Mum in months. I smiled, though tears burned my eyes. "I'm fine, love. Just tired." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I shouldn't have said those things. I didn't mean them." My throat tightened. "I know. You were angry. It's all right." He sighed softly. "I'll come home next week, I promise." I smiled through my tears. I'd like that. We talked for a while, small things, gentle things, until the sun came up. When he finally hung up, I sat there listening to the quiet hum of the world waking. But the truth was, my body felt weak, too weak. The months of stress, the sleepless nights, the fear, it had all taken its toll. I went upstairs, the box still clutched in my hands, and placed it gently on my bedside table. And as I lay down, exhaustion pressing over me like a soft blanket, I whispered, "He'll know now. He'll finally know." When I opened my eyes, sunlight was spilling through the curtains. It was soft, golden, the kind of morning light that used to make me believe everything could start over. But not that day. That day felt different. My chest ached in a way that wasn't just emotional anymore. Breathing was harder. Every inhale felt like a struggle. I sat up slowly, clutching the edge of the bed, and looked at the small wooden box beside me. It almost glowed in the light. The box that had held our past, our secrets, the truth I had spent half my life protecting. I reached out, brushing my fingers across its lid.
He'll know now, I whispered to the empty room. He'll finally know. Then I smiled, a soft, tired smile, and lay back down. The rain had stopped. The house was quiet, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. That was the last thing I remember. It was 2 days later when Oliver arrived at the cottage. He hadn't answered his phone all week, too busy, too consumed by work, until a neighbor called him. Her voice was shaking. "Oliver, your mom, I'm so sorry." He drove through the night, rain pouring down the motorway, headlights blurring in his tears. Every memory of her flooded back, her laughter, her tea, the way she'd hum quietly while cooking breakfast. He kept hearing her voice, "Be careful, love," and that last phone call replayed again and again. I'd like that. When he reached the cottage, dawn was breaking over the fields. The garden was overgrown, the windows misted. Everything looked exactly the same, except for the silence. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. On the table sat 2 teacups, one half full as if she'd just stepped out for a moment. But she hadn't. Oliver sank into the kitchen chair and buried his face in his hands. Guilt hit him like a wave. He had said those words, "You never did anything for me," and now she was gone. He would have given anything to take them back. Hours later, when the funeral arrangements were nearly done, Oliver went upstairs to her room. He sat on her bed, tracing the pattern on the quilt she'd sewn when he was a boy. That's when he noticed it, the small wooden box on her bedside table. He frowned, lifting it gently. It was heavier than it looked. Across the lid were his father's initials, D.M.A. For a long moment, he just stared at it, unsure whether he had the right to open it. But then he remembered something. Her voice, faint in his memory. "If anything happens to me, go to the attic. The box will tell you everything." His breath caught. He opened it slowly. Inside were letters, photographs, and one envelope addressed simply, "For Oliver, when he's ready to know." His hands trembled as he broke the wax seal. The first page was written in his father's handwriting, shaky, uneven, but unmistakable. "My dearest boy, if you're reading this, it means I failed you in life, but perhaps I can do something for you now," in words. The letter told a story his mother had carried for decades. His father's illness, the debts, the dangerous men, the choice he'd made to work for them just long enough to buy Oliver a future. And then her promise. "Your mother saved you, Oliver. When I was gone, they came for her. She gave up everything, the savings, the home, the peace she deserved to keep you safe. You will never know the full extent of what she endured, but know this, she did everything for you." By the time he reached the end, Oliver's tears had soaked through the paper. He opened the second envelope, her handwriting this time. The words were short, gentle, like her voice. "My darling boy, I hope by now you've read your father's letter. You see, love, it was never about what I said or didn't say. It was about keeping you safe enough to hate me, because that meant you were free. You once said I never did anything for you, but I did everything for you. Always. Mum. X." Oliver pressed the letter to his chest and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that echoed through the empty house. He looked around her room, the photographs on the walls, the little notes she left, the old teacup by her bed, and realized every inch of that house was her love. Quiet, invisible, but everywhere. Weeks passed. The cottage was still, frozen in time. Oliver couldn't bring himself to sell it. Instead, he restored it, repainted the walls, fixed the roof, planted her favorite roses outside the kitchen window. Sometimes he'd sit at the table with her letters spread before him and whisper, "I'm sorry, Mom." One evening, as he was cleaning the attic, he found something he hadn't noticed before, a small folded paper tucked beneath the box lining. It was a photograph. Him as a child, sitting on Daniel's lap, his mother behind them, smiling. On the back, in her handwriting, were 3 words, "My 2 reasons." He sank to the floor, tears falling freely. And that night, for the first time in years, he wrote her back. A letter she'd never read, but one he needed to write. "Mom, you were right. I wasn't ready to know. I thought strength meant money, pride, success. But you were the strongest person I ever knew. I just wish I'd told you that when you were still here." He placed the letter inside the box and closed it gently. Months later, on a quiet spring morning, Oliver stood at her grave, a simple stone under an old oak tree, overlooking the fields she loved. He brought the box with him, wrapped in a linen cloth. As the wind stirred the grass, he knelt and placed it beside her headstone. "I kept your promise, Mom," he whispered. "No more secrets." He smiled through his tears. "You did everything for me. And I finally know." The wind picked up, soft, gentle, carrying the scent of lavender and rain. And though the world was quiet, for a brief moment, he could almost hear her voice again, warm and tender. "I always did, love." He stayed there until the sun dipped low, the sky glowing gold and pink, the same light that had once filled her kitchen. Then, with the last look, he turned and walked down the lane, the faint sound of birds echoing in the distance. Behind him, the cottage stood bathed in evening light, windows open, curtains fluttering softly, as if it too was finally at peace. Years later, Oliver restored the cottage completely. He never sold it. Instead, he opened it as a small retreat for single mothers, a quiet place to rest, to heal, to begin again. He named it the Lavender House, and by the door, engraved into a small brass plate, were the words, "For Mom, who did everything even when no one saw." Every visitor who came there felt the warmth of that home, the peace that filled it, though none of them knew the story behind it. But Oliver knew. And every night before locking the door, he'd whisper softly into the still air, "Thank you, Mom." And somewhere in the quiet hum of the countryside, it always felt like she whispered back,